Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into really a profound example of human adaptability. Mongolian nomadic life, set against the truly challenging backdrop of the Gobi Desert. Our mission here is to unpack some fascinating sources. We're looking at daily survival, sure, but also the deep cultural traditions and, importantly, how this ancient way of life is bumping up against modernization and global forces.
Yeah, and you absolutely have to start with the environment itself. I mean, the resilience required here is it's almost hard to grasp. The Gobi is iconic, remote, a cold desert known for its extremes. We're talking huge temperature swings, down to minus 40 Celsius in winter, then soaring over 40 Celsius in summer. Not surprising, early explorers called it things like the desert of death. Surviving here isn't just tough, it's a daily strategic battle.
Okay, so if the climate is that hostile, the way they survive must be incredibly refined. How self-sufficient are they really?
It's very close to autarky. Pretty much everything, their economy, their food, even their shelter depends entirely on the health of their herds. If the livestock struggle, the family unit itself is at risk. It all centers on what they call the 5 muzzles.
The 5 muzzles. Okay, tell us about that.
Right, so these are the 5 traditional types of animals they herd. They group them into hot muzzles, think horses and sheep, the faster, maybe more valuable ones, and cold muzzles, cows or yaks, camels, and goats, hardier, maybe slower. The distinction relates partly to mobility and value, but together these animals provide literally everything. Meat, milk, fat, leather, even the materials for their traditional dwelling, the grugger, and their clothes.
So their entire life rhythm is dictated by the needs of these animals. That must mean constant strategic movement across the landscape, depending on pasture, weather.
Precisely. Nomadic families will move their girders several times a year. In summer, the priority is good grazing land and being near a river for water. But come winter, everything flips. The main goal is protection from that intense cold. They'll find sheltered spots like a small valley or near some trees and put a lot of effort into building small enclosures just to keep the herds warm and safe overnight, especially from wolves.
Wow. And the amount of work needed just to maintain that.
Yeah.
The division of labor must be pretty intense.
Oh, it's exhausting. The woman in the family, she's incredibly busy managing the household, the kids, the cooking, but crucially, the dairy. That often means milking mares or cows 5, maybe more times a day. And then there's all the processing, turning that milk into storable products like cream, yogurt, cheese. It's very time-consuming. Meanwhile, the husband is out watching the herds, which can be spread over huge areas, and he has to gather them all back every single night. Wolf attacks are a constant threat.
It sounds relentless, just a constant grind. Given those pressures, how does that shape their diet? What does that reality mean for what they eat?
Well, it makes it extremely focused. Especially in a place like the Gobi, the traditional diet is overwhelmingly meat and dairy. You find very, very few vegetables or fruits. Naturally, every calorie counts.
I know dairy is huge for them, and it's much more than just drinking milk, right? What are some of the key staples?
Absolutely. They rely heavily on milk from goats, camels, and mares, processed in different ways. Probably the most culturally significant is arag, that's fermented mare's milk. It's a common drink, needs constant churning, actually, and plays a role in rituals for good luck. But, the sources are pretty clear. Without refrigeration, the fresh milk can taste warm, maybe a bit sour, and the hard, dried cheeses, sometimes described as quite sour and bitter. It's about function, about necessity.
And for protein, mutton is king, essentially.
Yes, mutton, which can sometimes mean mature goat meat, too. It's typically eaten daily, often in a soup called sholtakul, which translates to soup with food. Basically, mutton boiled with some noodles, maybe a milky broth. And the sources really highlight how every resource is used. There's an observation of one family eating goat stomach and blood-congealed innards for breakfast.
Wow. That level of resourcefulness is absolute. It paints a picture of pure necessity.
It really does. And another detail that kind of underscores the harshness, the drinking water often tastes faintly of mutton.
Not intentionally flavored.
No. It's because they often use the same large pot for cooking meat and boiling water.
Yeah.
Water can be scarce and cleaning facilities are limited. And then you have bortsig, which is a very hard, unleavened bread, often eaten dipped in milk tea.
Okay, so if the parents are that focused on just basic survival tasks, how do children learn everything they need to know? It must start incredibly young, through doing.
It's basically an informal education built entirely on observation and helping out. By age 5, kids are looking after lambs. By 6, maybe calves. By the time they're, say, 9 to 15, they're capable shepherds. They learn respect for nature, the work ethic, everything, long before any formal schooling might start. It's baked into growing up.
And their play is directly linked to this learning process, too. I was really struck by the Shaga games.
Ah, yes, Shaga. It uses the ankle bone of a sheep, a small four-sided bone. There are apparently over 80 different games you can play with it, and crucially, each side of the bone represents one of the main nomadic animals: sheep, goat, horse, camel. So even play reinforces their connection to the herds. Kids start racing these ankle bones when they're as young as 3.
That's incredible. It's far more than just a game then. It's like a fun mental development tool. What's the takeaway from that kind of play?
It's vital preparation. It helps with counting, comparing things, hand-eye coordination, basically getting them ready for school learning later on, but all while keeping their cultural heritage alive and central. It's quite ingenious, really.
And speaking of heritage, you can't talk about Mongolia without talking about the horse. The sources mention something like 500 adjectives just to describe horses.
That's right. And that tells you something profound. The horse isn't just transport. It's central to their identity, their cognition, their language. It shapes how they see the world. This deep connection is perfectly symbolized by the morin-kur, the horse-head fiddle. It's recognized by UNESCO. The origin story is quite moving. A man supposedly created the first one to remember his beloved horse after it died, using its own mane and tail hair for the strings.
And this whole culture is put on display during the Nadam festival, right? The 3 manly games: wrestling, horse racing, archery. We have to mention the wrestling outfit.
Yes, that's definitely memorable. The wrestlers wear these very minimal outfits, basically tiny bolero-style jackets and brightly colored Speedo-like briefs. And the winner performs this traditional eagle dance. It's a real spectacle of physical prowess and cultural pride.
So we have this incredibly rich ancient culture, deeply tied to the land and animals. But as you mentioned earlier, it's facing challenges. Modernization is creeping in.
It is, and quite rapidly. You see traditional lagers being supplemented or sometimes replaced by small houses on wheels. These are often towed by 4x4 vehicles, which means less reliance on camels for transport. Motorbikes are starting to replace horses for herding, just because they're faster. And solar panels, car batteries, they're bringing electricity for light, for charging mobile phones out on the steppe. The connection to tradition is there, but the tools are definitely changing.
But this shift is modernization. It's happening alongside another huge challenge, climate change, right? Those ZUDs you mentioned.
Exactly, and that's a critical collision. These climate hazards, like the ZUDs, those are the really severe winters that cause huge numbers of livestock deaths. They seem to be getting worse, more frequent. The ZUD in 2010 was catastrophic. It wiped out something like 25% of the entire national herd in Mongolia.
A quarter of the herd. That's devastating. And connecting this to the bigger picture, the sources draw a really interesting contrast in how different governments in the region handle this kind of risk, even in the same environment.
This is where resilience gets complicated. It becomes socially constructed, you know?
Yeah.
Not just about how harsh the weather is. If you look at Mongolia, the sources describe relatively weak governance in these vast rural areas. They depend heavily on traditional mobile herding and customary ways of coping. But that means when a major disaster like a dud hits, their ability to respond effectively is limited. They often end up needing international aid.
Okay, so how does that compare with neighboring China dealing with similar Gobi conditions?
Well, in the parts of the Gobi within China, you see a very different approach. Much stronger state control. They have policies like ecological resettlement, which actually restrict traditional nomadic movement and livelihood.